Today we're going to run through everything you could possibly want or need to know when it comes to an ASIC miner. An ASIC miner is a Bitcoin miner. There's also ASIC miners for many other different cryptocurrencies. So we're going to go through the basics, right? Taking it out of the box, plugging in the cables. Just if you knew nothing, then we're going to go into more advanced topics like overclocking, underclocking. So we're going to run the gambit of learning everything from beginner to advanced topics. Everything will be broken apart down in the timestamps in the video description below. And we're also going to dive into other topics related to it, like where do you buy one? Where are the good deals? What to watch out for to make sure you don't get scammed, and how to maximize your mining returns. So my name is Vosk, you're on the VoskCoin YouTube channel. I've been working on building my own full-time Bitcoin crypto mining farm. I've learned a lot along the way. Some of these lessons have been very painful as well as expensive. So I hope to share everything I've learned with you in today's video. Once upon a time, it was one CPU, one vote, mine Bitcoin with your computer, right? Or really anything with a CPU in it, but really it was always ending up as a computer. Then it became an arms race and more powerful hardware specialized in Bitcoin mining appeared. So to jump straight to Bitcoin, you want a piece of that? Well, you'll need a Bitcoin mining rig, specifically an ASIC, an application-specific integrated circuit miner. ASIC miners are custom computers and each one mines a specific mining algorithm. Like for example, a Bitcoin miner mines SHA-256. There's other cryptocurrencies that have mining algorithms like Eagle Song and Blake2S and many others. We'll talk about them. But the point is, this is purpose-built hardware. To give it to you straight, these ASIC companies really aren't all that great. They're kind of crappy companies, but they're better than they used to be, and there's more options than there used to be. The pros with ASIC miners is this is what they do. They're normally the most powerful, the most efficient, and the summary is if an ASIC miner pops up for a specific cryptocurrency, that's it, right? It's more powerful than multi-purpose hardware like a graphics card or something else. That's it. So at that point, it's just an ASIC miner will be mining that cryptocurrency. For example, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Litecoin, Cadena, Nervos Network, CKB, among many other cryptocurrencies. And once they transition to ASIC mining, it's just a matter of who's going to make the best ASIC miner, and that'll be the one to buy. ASIC miners are easy to use. They're pretty much literally plug and play. They can be loud, they can be power hungry. Make sure you know what kind you're getting into. There's a lot of mini ASIC miners, or smaller ones, or quieter ones, more efficient ones, or less power intense ones. Would be easily deployed in many places, including your home. But for example, the latest and greatest Bitcoin miners, they're big, they're power hungry, and they're loud. Understand the noise factor and look these up before you buy them. For example, some ASIC miners, like especially Bitcoin miners, like the 1246 we had by Avalon, and a lot of the AMP miners by Bitmain are insanely loud, okay? Even the bigger gold shell miners, the full-size ones, like this big, they're super loud. As a general rule of thumb, the more electricity you use, the more heat you're gonna produce, which means you're gonna have more fans that are gonna spin faster, which create more noise. But by doing all that, they earn more money. But again, they have a higher electric bill. That's the gist of it. ASIC miners will continue to be the best option for mining for most coins moving forward, unfortunately. So mining cryptocurrency is the most incredible way to earn passive income. True. And honestly, it's pretty easy. And it really is kind of as simple as like you buy it, you plug it into the wall, you input your wallet address, and you're off to the races. It used to be much more difficult. But how do you do it safely? So the first things first is obviously a mining rig uses electricity. And you're like, okay, cool, I bought it, now I've got to plug it in. But then you plug it in, you trip your breaker, you start freaking out, you wondering, what do I do now? I spent a lot of money on this. I need to make my money back. Don't cheap out, do it right or don't do it at all. Especially if you're gonna get a big expensive mining rig that uses a lot of power, the more power you draw in here, the riskier it gets. In electricity, you have voltages, you have phases, there's a lot of things that at play here. And I just wanna break down what I know and what I've learned, just share it so hopefully you don't make any costly mistakes and even just kind of understand this. So
let's start with the basics. In the United States of America, your residential electric rate is considered 110 volt, 120 volt. You're dealing with 120 voltage. You may look at a power supply like an ATX power supply, and it'll say like 110 to 240 volts. You look at some, say, Bitcoin miners, and on the side of that power supply, it'll say normally something like 180 volt to 240 volt. If it has that, that means it only operates on a higher voltage. Higher voltage is more efficient. So just rough rule of thumb here, let's say you're pulling 1,000 watts, which is a measurement of electricity draw, right? So if you're pulling 1,000 watts on 120 volt, and then you pull 1,000 watts on 240 volt, they say you're probably getting about 5% more efficiency on that 240 volt. So you would be saving 50 watts. You build out a whole mining farm, you're gonna be saving a lot of money long-term. And it's just kind of, why be wasteful and why not save money? Money saved is money made in essence. In a home, you have one, we're just gonna call it 120 volt, right? And in your home, you actually have 240 volt because you have two 120 legs and you can run them in tandem, and then you can get 240 volt in your home. This is safer. You can pull more amps on this because it's more efficient. It's just a win across the board.
So you can get 240 volt installed because they basically just run both of those legs.
So basically you always pull 240 volt if you're getting serious about mining. And also many mining rigs have attached power supplies that only operate on 240 volt. They're a multi-voltage device. They're more efficient on 240 volt.
You call an electrician. Hey man, I need you to install an outlet at my house. So I want to add a 30 amp outlet. Okay, yeah, no problem. Okay, and this is the plug. I want an L630P. That's it. You want a 30 amp outlet with an L630P plug. Why an L630P? That's not the traditional plug. You won't be able to get a power cable that plugs right into that or you shouldn't. Because what you would plug into that is a PDU. It's basically a surge protector, an outlet extender for really cool people mining cryptocurrency. So it's the safe way to do it. It's very expandable. You can run a lot of gear off of it as long as it falls within that amp range. I just use Triplite PDUs. You just look them up, Triplite PDU. I'll link a couple down below to make it simple, but Triplite PDU, L630P plug, plugs right in. From there, you will plug these cables into your mining rigs. Write it down, C13 to C14. That is the most common plug. It's what commonly looks like one end as what you plug into probably almost every electronic device in your house, and the other end plugs into the PDU. Most of these PDUs, and the ones you should get, support C13, C14 plugs, as well as C19, C20. So C19, C20s, they look like the stone face. So and that's because they're mad that they've got to run so much electricity through there. These are basically big boy plugs. We just run through what I just said real quick. Call electrician, 30 amp. A 30 amp circuit is the biggest circuit you can install, right? That's generally speaking in your home. That's it. 30 amp, 240 volt circuit, right? I want an L630P plug. That's it. Then you buy a PDU, you plug that in, and you buy some power cables, and you buy a little shelf, and that's it. It's really that simple. But there's a little bit more to know. For example, you never want to use more than 80%. So on a 30 amp outlet, you could pull 30 amps, but you shouldn't. You start to max it out, it starts to be not safe, and what you're really worried about here is exceeding the draw, becoming too hot, fire hazard, stuff like that. So for example, if you pulled 100 amps, you would use only 80 amps, especially because mining rigs draw that power 24/7, 365, baby. They never stop. And understand that electricity being used, consumed, and moved generates heat. The more miners you plug in, the more heat that's going to be created. So you need to account for that with some sort of exhaust system. Really the simplest thing is just to have intake vents and outtake fans. So let's bring it back to the electricity, a little bit of planning. It's okay, well, how many rigs can I run? I mean, you really just got to run the numbers. So you take the watts, right? Watts to amps conversion calculator. Enter your voltage. Again, you can mine safely on 120 volt, which that should probably be addressed, right? So you don't have to upgrade to 240 volt, but 240 volt is more efficient. You can run more miners on it and your electric bill will be less. Short answer, correct answer. But how do you measure the electricity consumption? So if it's a small miner, it's real easy. You just buy a kilowatt. It's this little electricity meter thing, you get one on Amazon, right? And let's say it says I'm pulling 1200 watts. And all I've got to do is put that in. 1200 watts at 120 volt means I'm consuming 10 amps, right? So let's say you had a mining rig that was pulling 1000 watts. It'd be pulling 8.33 amps. But let's say that you were on 240 volt, right? Like we discussed. You would be drawing half that. You would be drawing 4.1 amps. And that's why it's so much easier to trip the breakers on 120 volt as opposed to 240 volt. So if you have a mining rig pulling 10 amps and you have a 10 amp power cable, that's incorrect. Get the 15 amp power cable for the mining rig pulling 10 amps. Boom, now it's safe. The fact of the matter is that you need to find out what the IP address is for this device after you plug it in and turn it on. Who's on my Wi-Fi? That's an app, and there's other devices, or you can simply just log into your router, because you log into these remotely and control them remotely. That means you can even do it from your phone. You don't even have to have a computer to be mining these days. Normally I just log in from my desktop computer because that's easier, but you don't have to. Almost every password is either admin, root. There's a lot of different ways to get internet to your device. So you can just plug it in by your router, right? And then plug an Ethernet cord in. Or you can get a 100-foot Ethernet cord, run it across your house and plug it in, you got Ethernet. You can use repeaters or other devices to get internet throughout your house. Basically, you just need an Ethernet connection. Most ASIC miners especially do not operate off of Wi-Fi. And that's okay. Honestly, you get way better reliability off an Ethernet cable, and you have less Wi-Fi interference throughout your house. So at this point, you understand the basics of what the device is, getting power to it, getting Ethernet to it or internet to it. So you're into the device. Now we see, looks good, hashboard check, and whatever else. And here's the main thing right here is you click to the pool configuration. It's all about the configuration, and you put in whatever mining pool you want. Some mining pools simply use a wallet address. All you do is put your wallet address in, worker name. Most don't care about the password. You could literally put in anything as the password, and you just have to make sure the mining pool information is correct. So that would be your stratum, your port number, basically just the URL and the correct port number right there. And it'll let you know pretty quickly if it's connected. It'll say active online. You can check your address on the mining pool and you can see the rewards start rolling in. But all you have to do is put your username, .worker name, again, the password, anything, 123x, and then you just need the correct pool address. And that's it. All you have to do is just monitor your results there on the mining pool. Again, if you put your wallet address in, normally payouts are automated. If you use, for example, F2 pool or DX pool, you need to put in a payout address. Where do you mine your coins to? You need a wallet. You have to set up a wallet somewhere yourself. You can just say make a Coinbase account and mine your coins directly into there, or you can just hold the coins in your own wallet. It's totally up to you, but please understand, you've got to do that part. These coins that you mine have to have somewhere to go. So just navigate to your account settings, go to the coin you're mining. For example, like on F2 pool, you go to LTC, you punch your Litecoin address in, then it says, oh, this is merge mined with Dogecoin. You're gonna definitely want a Doge address too. You go ahead and paste your Doge address. They're different. Make sure you understand that and set it up accordingly. And then your payouts will just happen automatically like clockwork. Power, check. Internet, check. Understanding what it is, right? Check. Wallet, check. So everything's checked off, the device is on, now we can access it, sync it to our wallet, right? And basically have it start mining to us and start actually making money. So you're thinking about buying a miner. Well, first I want you to pump the brakes and seriously listen to what I'm about to tell you. There are so many scammers. There are so many fake sites. There are so many impersonators. There's so much BS. Just people trying to prey on cryptocurrency users and so forth, because crypto payments are non-refundable, all right? So it's just ripe for scamming if they're able to convince you that if you send them Bitcoin or whatever, that you'll get a mining rig from them. Now, with that out of the way, I've got links to 3 places that I've had a good experience with getting miners from over the past several years. Number 1, and my first choice, is going to be ASIC Marketplace. They become a big sponsor of the VoskCoin YouTube channel. They've got good prices, they've got fast shipping, and they've got a coupon code VoskCoin. Punch that in and save some coin. If you click our link, it helps the channel as well, right? Always full disclosures and transparency here. But a great example of how ASIC Marketplace has been great for me to work with is they got us our Kaspa miners quickly. And that has allowed us to just get a great return on those mining rigs. If we sat around waiting for them for weeks or months, that's the difference between earning or really missing out on thousands of dollars of mining profitability. The next option is going to be Crypto Miner Bros. Again, they're a ASIC reseller that's been around for a while. It's been a good experience working with them. They've got good prices. They've got us our miners pretty quick as well. We have a link and a coupon code for them as well. And like always, it's just code VoskCoin to save some coin. The next option is going to be Coin Mining Central. We've worked with CMC the longest. It kills me that you have to click a button to change the pricing to USD, but that's a personal gripe. Maybe that's my American showing. But they've got one of the biggest inventory of ASIC miners. And yeah, you guessed it. You can punch in the code VoskCoin to save some coin. But the most important thing again is I'm not just trying to, manipulate you into clicking our link or something. But if you click our short link in the video description below, 1, it supports the channel and that means a lot. 2, you ensure that you end up on the right website, okay? Because like, for example, take Crypto Miner Bros. There's a fake scam site called Crypto Miners Bro. And it looks the same. That's how deceptive these scammers are. So be advised. And if you want a second opinion on the miners you're thinking about, post a thread on VoskCoin Talk, our forum, or join our VoskCoin Discord server. Connect with me in real time, as well as our incredible community. Today I'm going to show you how to quickly, easily change a control board, how to figure out what control board you would need, and well, that's it. It's pretty simple. Anybody can do this, so don't be intimidated by this repair. There's a few different types of control boards. You'll need to look at your miner and see which one that it uses. You also may see something like BB on the top of it, which means beagle bone. If you have a beagle bone control board, well, then you have a beagle bone control board. You just need to make sure you get the right model. So we're gonna go old school. I'm just gonna use a screwdriver. Normally you can pop this off if you push really hard, if you're having trouble with this screw, but otherwise you can just push it in and then you're just going to pull it up carefully. Now that we've got the lid off, right, we've got the control board right here, and it's going to be pretty simple. We're just going to unhook everything, right? So I'm going to take these ribbon cables and remember where everything's going, right? And I mean, pretty quick, we just removed all the cables. So we're gonna need to flip this thing around and remove these 2 screws here on the front, and then it'll just slide out through the front. Now just taking a screwdriver or drill, removing those screws. Look, comes right off. It's actually zip tied to the fan power cable, which is that multicolored cable running up. And whoop, see you later, little guy. So now I'll just place the board here, slide it backwards. It's like we're getting a little bit of resistance. And then we'll just start plugging and chugging. The good thing is these parts, they have like a little bit of what's basically muscle memory, right? I mean, those are just sitting there right where I wanted them to be. So now everything's connected. What I'm gonna do, and I have to illustrate how serious this is. You probably shouldn't do this. I'm gonna plug this in and test it before I button it up. make sure it works so I don't have additional steps. This is a bus bar. This carries electrical current. This will hurt you. This is, I'm not even kidding. This can hurt you. Or at best case, it's just not gonna feel good. All right, that's the big disclaimer. Slide right in where you would expect and want them to go, and let's fire it up. So you can see on my app that a new miner popped up. Ignore all my terrible naming here on miners. So when you replace the control board, you're gonna get a new IP address. So this is good. We have access. Now let's go to system, and we're gonna do a firmware upgrade. We're gonna install the latest firmware for whatever miner model that we have. There's nothing crazy you need to do. You download the file, you click the little upload icon, you select it, and then it uploads and it kind of handles the rest. Remember, you're going to need to input new mining pool information when you swap control boards. There's no saving it because you're installing basically a new brain onto this miner. You put in your mining pool information after your firmware has been successfully installed. At this point, you could probably leave it, but after I save the mining pool information, then I just go ahead and click restart on the miner, and then just give it a second. As we can see now, the miner's coming back online, and it's hashing again. And this is a successful repair, which is all you could ever ask for when you throw a mining rig that's no longer working on your repair bench with the goal of repairing it. Today, I'm gonna be replacing a mining rig, ASIC mining rig power supply, specifically a Bitmain amp miner, and this is gonna be a Bitcoin miner. They're all pretty much the same, and many of them all actually just use the same power supply. There's multiple revisions. I'm gonna explain what that is and basically make sure you get the right one. And you'll realize by the end of this, if you've ever hung up a picture, you can change the power supply. So first things first, grab your miner. It's probably not working. Okay, throw it on the bench. Grab your drill, or your pleb, a screwdriver. Then remove the screws. You're pretty much removing all of the screws as shown. You need to get the hood off because you're going to have to unattach these cables that go into the power supply, and you'll be removing this PCIe connection, not from the control board, because that's probably fine, but from the power supply. And once all those screws are removed, it just slides out. The most common failure in an Antminer ASIC miner, a Bitcoin mining rig, in this case this is an Antminer S19J Pro, is a power supply failure. The second most common failure is a control board failure. Two very easy and cheap to replace components when compared to the average cost of an ASIC Bitcoin mining rig. So this is the bad power supply. How do I know that? Well, we wrote bad on it. That was a good start. In particular, this is a APW 121215, which is basically the model. This is version B. And this is some really cool information. Basically, with each revision, they end up having like another 250 watts, if I recall, of additional power, if not more. Which means that when we get to revision F, we're well above the 3,000 something watt rating of these earlier power supplies. So a key note, right, when you're sliding this on. So really easy way to remember this, right? Power is going to be on the same side as Ethernet. So that means this is going to be the side that goes in there. We're going to need to get this connection to here. This is where the bus bar is going to connect and make that connection I warned you about. And when we look at this, it's got two connection points and it's just going to slide onto the rail. The top one basically goes under,
and the bottom one goes on top. So the connections sit on the inside like this. Easy enough, and you just slide it around through there. Only word of caution is just make sure this doesn't fall down there, get pinched or anything like that. I mean, this is pretty much the only thing that can get in your way. This PCIe connection should be disconnected, and then this other ribbon connection should be disconnected. But once you get it on there, you can just go ahead and, while we're right here talking about it, plug those in. I shouldn't slap this. And now we have the power supply partially reinstalled. So now we need to put the hood back on the power supply, get this thing all tidied up and dressed up. Key note here is going to be these two guys. Why are you bent? Well, whatever, it's bent. So these two hooks will go in right here, and that's what you're going to focus on. You just basically find those hook points, pull, and voila, that went pretty smooth. Goes right on. Looks like a factory fit and finish. And as always, keep track of your screws and what they're doing, where they go. So these screws with this little crush washer thing is going to be what we're going to use in all three of these locations. So now I'm going to put these other two in. We'll get this thing finally dressed up, see if this PSU is good. Just like that, we have swapped a power supply. And I know this video is a little long. I'm taking my time. I'm trying to show a lot of step-by-step here. But I mean, it's easy, and the actual process is basically, remove screws, slide out, slide back in, replace screws. Very easy, very simple. Okay, so it's turning on, the fans are firing, it didn't blow up yet. That's cool. Now there's a very key step. We need to go in and update the firmware. And this is exactly what we expected to see. The miner's online, the miner is working. Okay, get power type version failed. So this is a version B. Remember, this firmware on this miner was never updated. It's from 2021. So I'm going to click on system, and then I'm going over to firmware. I will come here, grab that file, keep the same settings, click update, it will upload, it will apply, and this is how you update the firmware from the dashboard. There's the old school method of using an SD card and basically flashing it on the device, but if you can access the dashboard, just use the dashboard. It's a lot easier. And so we'll give this a second, just be patient. This is the last thing you want to corrupt. This is working. Our repair is successful. This is everything we wanted. Bitcoin mining is tough. More difficult than ever, literally, mathematically, to mine a Bitcoin. And the amount of Bitcoins mined per day is going down in the not so distant future. When it comes to Bitcoin mining, more power means more Bitcoin. So is it worth cranking your miner up to 11? Because it's not just an additional power supply you can add. There's overclocking software as well, but depending on the market conditions, you actually might want to be underclocking your miner as opposed to overclocking it, depending on your electricity rate. This is going to be the manifold mining firmware. We've talked about custom mining firmware before, and actually the developers of this firmware worked with WhatsMiner because it was developed in partnership with Bixbit. This is what the settings look like when you're on the high. High is a high overclock, it's high power consumption. And what's nice is it shares with you the frequency, the voltage, power limit, power max, things like that. This is what it looks like in the low setting. It has these numbers input, and it also has a normal setting. Again, they have firmware support for the S19s, S17s, L3s, S9s, whatever. Basically, these popular Antminer and WhatsMiner Bitcoin mining rigs. You can also utilize remote monitoring through Bixbit here, and that is free. And the firmware is free. But why are these things free? Well, because there's a 2.8% developer fee. So this is very cool.
but the efficiency on this hardware, especially at that overclocked rate, is not profitable for me from a residential at-home mining point of view. If you got super cheap electricity, this could be for you. You know, the main thing here, I should say, is efficiency. It's about getting your miner more efficient, how to achieve a higher efficiency. Okay, so we're going to go into, you know, what firmwares will give you full adjustability if the firmware that it comes with does not offer that, and how that can help you maybe not even decrease your hash rate or slightly, and then hopefully exponentially decrease your power consumption, which will in turn increase your efficiency and increase your overall profitability. If you're worried about changing firmware and how difficult that is, first you can download the firmware that's on your device, you know, to your computer, so you always have it handy. We're going to be using the Bixbit firmware. We've talked about it before, and if you want to change the firmware, all you have to do is click Flash Firmware, you'll click Browse, and then you will select the associated firmware that you want to load. So if we log into our mining device, you know, you just grab the IP address associated with it, and from there, to change the firmware, you're just going to go right here to the first page where you log in. You're going to click Upgrade, but basically you're just going to be able to generate a archive, okay, and that's going to be a backup. It's going to be called the same thing on the stock firmware, and you can always go back to your original firmware with that, or download it from, say, Bitmain's site. After you flash the firmware, give it a couple minutes to get going. You can click on miner status, and then from here you can see your mining performance. One of the biggest things is not only going to be to evaluate your miner side hash rate, but to go to the mining pool and look at your hash rate and what you're registering there. Also, keep in mind that this firmware does have a dev fee, okay? It's 3%, and that's okay if I'm making, or at least saving, you know, more than 3%. Than if whatever it costs me basically is less than I'm earning, you know, by using this firmware, it's fine. So there's a lot of options in here, which is really fun if you like to tinker with this kind of stuff. You get a lot of good information. Again, if you want to learn more about this stuff and tinker with it. If you don't, then just ignore it. If you do, well, sweet, we've got it there. What's very interesting here is that not only can you tune this stuff down, you can crank it up. And keep in mind, these are preset miner configurations. You can, you know, customize this more if you want to and achieve different things. So it's really fun. You know, say it was a crazy bull run, you could be like, yep, cranking this thing up to the max, because right now, dollar for dollar stuff is my go-to. But this firmware has always been great for us. It's been easy to use, and it's really been nice to have the customization options. If you're struggling with your day-to-day operations, if you want to increase your efficiency, if you want to have that customization, you know, I think looking at options like this firmware or other comparable firmwares, like this isn't the only firmware out there, okay? I get that. Enter Brains. It's a Bitcoin miner firmware solution to give you full customization of your miner. Right? You can overclock it. You can deploy it in immersion easily and effectively and tune the parameters for that environment. You can underclock it, or basically turn the power consumption down, whether you just want to or need to, or you're chasing better efficiency. There's a lot you can do here, even more than what I just rattled off. Today, I want to dig into Brains, what it is, and how I'm trying it out with my miners that I just gave a permanent bath to. Yes, they have been dunked in an immersion tank. Enter Brains, auto-tuning mining firmware, increase your hash rate, improve efficiency as much as 25%, mine on any pool, or get 0% pool fees, which drastically reduces your fee associated with using their firmware. This Brains software is available on the S19s, the S17 series, the T17 series, and the S9 series. And you notice it says X19. That means it also supports the T19 Bitcoin miners. The notable difference here is up to 20% better J/TH or joules/terahash or watts per terahash, right? And what does that mean? It's basically how much electricity you're consuming for how much Bitcoin mining power or hashes per second you're producing. There's a lot of things Brains can do: bulk device installation, updates, tools, SSH unlocker, quick startup, immersion cooling, ready preheat options if you're in a cold environment. So there's all that stuff. And I referenced Brains Pool. You may be familiar with Slush Pool. We mined back on Slush Pool when I was getting into Bitcoin mining back in 2017. They are the original Bitcoin mining pool, so that's pretty cool. They also deploy Stratum v2, which they developed, and there's some benefits to Stratum v2. They had the Brains Toolbox. This is a way to monitor, deploy, and change many different miner configurations all at the same time. This has a full release on Linux, and the Windows and Mac releases are coming soon, but some of the software is floating around in their Telegram support group. That's the quick crash course overview. So this is Brains Pool, where my Brains miners are. I have 8 Bitmain Antminer S19J Pros, 104 terahash Bitcoin miners. I've got a faulty Triplite PDU, so one of my 8 miners is down right now. Not the biggest deal, I'll deal with that. So we can see these here. I had them running on stock configuration, added the 7th one, and changed some of the tuning parameters. So I'm going to click over to the workers here. You'll see all of my miners in question. You'll see a lot of different performance here. Why? Well, because I'm having some fun. So I've changed the parameters several hours ago. The tuner is still working. Default password is root. Default username is root as well. So if I come over here to the dashboard, you can see that this is just stock. So this is, again, a 104 terahash model. We're getting a real hash rate of 110, and our 24-hour hash rate is 105. So how? What's happening here, right? Well, we can see that it's bumping up our power usage right now. We're consuming an additional 250 watts reported over the stock 3068 watts. This puts us at about 30 watts per terahash. I'm thinking, how do I make this more viable? How do I make my operation more viable? Right now, I'm at 10 cents per kilowatt hour my electricity cost. Not great. Not great at all. So I am working on deploying 3-phase, which will bring my electricity rate down to 7 to 8 cents per kilowatt hour. There's a lot of ways to go about tuning these things. A key thing to understand when you're looking at hash rate as well as efficiency, especially on Brains, the hotter these things run, the less they're going to mine and the less efficient they're going to be. So a lot of my data came back between 23 watts a terahash, 24, 25. And Brains is really consistently pushing these more towards like 25 watts a terahash. They've all run their tuner. So the tuner ran for several days, several different on all of these different configurations. There's even more you can do with the actual fine tuning of all of this, right? You can put a hash rate target, you can put a power target, you can do dynamic power scaling and decreasing your values and things like that. Especially with my experience using this firmware, I just want to keep it nice and simple on target. This will significantly help the temperatures because right now I have 2 miners just at full bore over here. I mean, they're consuming 3,250 watts, and they're supposed to do 3,068. Again, stock firmware. 2.8 power limit coming in at about 3,000 watts consumed. So as I click around in this data, you see the variance. You see the 24, the 25. Now this is trended up towards 26. As I chase a good balance of efficiency versus just straight hash rate. How do I even do what I'm doing though, right? So we have the dashboard dark theme. I like it. All right, we can look at the hash rate. We can look at the temps here. Speaking of immersion mode, to do that, you go to configuration, you click on temperature and fans, and then you click the checkbox next to enable immersion mode. All the fans are then disabled. Enter performance. So with this, I have auto tuning on. I have power targets, and this is where I was adjusting all of those watt parameters. You can also instead do a hash rate target. One thing I have not enabled yet is dynamic performance scaling. In reference to all these temperatures and targets and stuff like that, that is under configuration, temperature and fans, and here's the auto setup. We can adjust these if we want to. We can go to manual, or we can completely disable this. Another cool feature with Brains is you can also enable or disable hash boards. Say you got a bum board, you don't have a replacement or feel like dealing with it or whatever, or any kind of issue, right? You click this, save and apply, bam, shut it down and move on, while still maintaining a good mining power footprint. Brains is going to be a great solution for me here. Got some good mining rewards on the Brains pool so far. Gonna have to mess around with it, do some more research. But yeah, this is fun. It kind of reminds me of the days of tuning graphics cards with GPU mining. I enjoy this. I think it's fun. It can be a little tedious, but once you finally nail that sweet spot, you're like, hell yeah, I got a finely tuned setup, baby. But to really round this out, from my point of view, this is very cool. This is very cool. And this is totally a bull run style mod in operation in these high overclock settings. Like when it's good, it's great in crypto. And you want to stack as much coin as you possibly can. And if you can run the numbers and it makes sense to turn up the electricity, right? So you're mining more coins, then it's worth it. It's just a numbers game, right? If I can double my power output, but it increases my Bitcoin mining hash rate by say 30-40%, but based on my electricity bill, then I earn X more dollars because of that, then it's worth it. Underclocking things in a bear market, absolutely a play depending on your electricity rate. If you have rigs already, like you already bought them, right? And now the market's low for mining rigs, like they're cheap, they're plentiful. Not too long ago, they were expensive and scarce. It's crazy how things go. If you got rigs that aren't really desired to be sold, right, then keep them. And if you can get them operating in a manner that is profitable, that's great. Because if you spend $10 in electricity, but you mine $11 in Bitcoin, well, then you're plus $1. I know that's not the most exciting way to explain it, but that's just the situation. That's what it is. Immersion mining. Bitcoin produces over $20 million per day in new coins, newly minted Bitcoins. And immersion mining has been absolutely just sweeping the Bitcoin mining industry as it's noiseless, it's more efficient, and it's an advanced cooling method that allows Bitcoin miners to overclock their Bitcoin miners further. So basically, you're mining more Bitcoins, you're earning more money, and you are even lowering your electricity bill while you do it. Today we're going to be doing an overview of immersion mining, and most notably, immersion mining solutions, companies that make small scale as well as large scale immersion mining, well, I'll say it again, solutions. Bitcoin mining faces a lot of scrutiny from a lot of different angles, right? Activists that don't know what they're talking about, governments that don't know what they're talking about, and just simply people that don't know what they're talking about. But how could you really just skirt right around that? Well, you could move a Bitcoin mining farm from being air-cooled, where it's going to have a big hum, because at the end of the day, you're moving a lot of air, to an immersion farm. Immersion farms are so discreet. They're basically silent. Do you want to start Bitcoin mining in a neighborhood and you've got an HOA and you can't really drop a loud mining shed in your backyard? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a solution for you. It's called immersion mining. Do you want to Bitcoin mine in your home, but you don't want to hear that wah of the fans? Well, then immersion mining might be for you, but it's not all pros. There are some cons. So let's start running through this stuff. Recently, we toured a Bitcoin mining farm that was entirely an immersion mining solution. DCX was the manufacturer of those. They're utilizing these immersion racks. In the Akil Dennis mining farm tour video, I really recommend you watch this mining farm tour. The keynote here is you'll see that they have the older generation of these enclosures here. So you can get just an enclosure, which is what I just got, right? So I have just one enclosure from DCX. Don't think this video is just fixated on DCX. We've got a ton of things to run through, but coming hot off of a DCX basically mining farm tour, and then also turning around and getting a DCX mining enclosure, I'm pretty excited. And well, we've got a lot of footage on that stuff. But basically, depending on the setup here, you can stick about 8 Antminer S19s in there. There's the Pro 9 and the Pro 10 immersion racks. I wish there was more documentation on their site. To put it into perspective, they're not small scale. They're pretty big scale. I mean, you look at just this picture. That's a decent size. So this kind of starts small and then I'll go up from there. So they have something they call the bit pod. Basically think of it as you slap a miner in there, right? And then they have the Pro 9 immersion mining enclosure and rack system. So the way their terminology works is this is an enclosure. And a rack system would be this. This is a rack. 1, 2, 3 on a rack like that. That's a rack system. So if you have something very small, for example, like just this bit pod, then something like the ICP 15 may be a good dry cooler for you. A dry cooler in immersion mining, think of it like a radiator. And let's take a step back for a second and really get back to the basics. Immersion mining is not hydro mining. It's not water cooled mining. It's liquid cooled mining, but it's this dielectric fluid. This is not water. Think of it more like oil. Basically, a dry cooler is essentially a radiator. I'm a car guy, so I like to break it down like that. But that's what we're dealing with. If you look at this immersion mining solution that I've received, you'll see as we run through these different setups that these companies deploy small and absolutely huge scale dry cooler solutions. This is a dry cooler that would be appropriate for about 8 ant miners in one of their enclosures. If you wanted to run a rack, you would need 3 of these instead of using a ton of these. For example, at Akil's mining farm that we toured with Dennis, the mining farm operator, then you would basically have, this is the size of a semi truck, and I'm not exaggerating. This is, here's a quick, preview of that. This is a semi truck, and this is basically a just absolutely freaking massive dry cooler. There are smaller scale, medium scale, if you will, solutions that they offer. They seem to have something for every size. For example, you see these units. They would be more probably the size of like a smart car as opposed to a semi truck. There's a company that has solutions that you'll find pretty similar to DCX. That's going to be Bixbit. And you may remember Bixbit if you're a longtime subscriber of the channel. But they're not just known for software solutions, they have been working on immersion mining solutions for a very long time. They've created their own container solution that they're very proud of. But what more people will find more interesting that they offer is going to be their smaller scale solutions. There's the cell. Something comparable to the cell would be like the enclosure that we just looked at from DCX. They're not the same. I'm not saying they're the same. What interests me, right, we have the cell solution. This can be deployed on single phase or 3-phase electricity, which, keep in mind, the bigger your deployment, the more likely you're just going to simply need 415 voltage, 3-phase industrial electricity. What's interesting about the cell is that they have a tap water cooling solution and then a dry cooling tower solution. I'm not really interested in bringing water into the mix, something that could fry my operation. So dry cooling is definitely what interests me, and dry cooling on this would be like the radiator concept that we just looked at. Pricing on the Bixbit cell, when you do it the small, cheaper way, it's going to come in under $3,000, right? But that's basically $1,000 per miner to do any form of immersion liquid cooling. So cooling tower bumps that price up a good bit. Then you go to a bigger tank that can fit that. You're basically going $1,000 per miner for immersion cooling, a la carte, small scale here, right? And then $1,500 into the dry cooler, and you're still going to either need to install this yourself or hire a contractor. And while this has been fixated on Bitcoin immersion mining, this of course can be replaced with GPUs, FPGAs, or altcoin mining rigs like Dogecoin, ant miners, and everything else. I mean, if the form factor's there, you can do the exact same thing. It's not like you need a specific dielectric fluid for different miners. Looking at this price point, I would say that it's comparable to the DCX deployments of a similar size. These build-outs are supposed to last for a long time. So even if you move on to different equipment, you will still have the immersion mining infrastructure. Something to think about. So enter fog hashing. So they were at Mining Disrupt this year. Your boy wasn't. I'll probably go next year finally. I've been bogged down. But you can see they've got a dry cooler. At a glance, their dry cooler looks a lot like DCX. And this is pulled from Hobbyists video walking through Mining Disrupt. You can see another enclosure there, and we'll go forward and we can see into the little enclosure here, and you know, simple, effective, nice. We can see that's a C2, I think, a model. A C1 or C1 Ultra supports a whopping 1 miner. There's the C2, 2 miners, and then there's the C6. Okay, we see some clear price options here as well. You're gonna need coolant no matter what you do. I would say at a glance, if they have a coolant option, just go with that manufacturer. You use their coolant, one less thing to complain or fight about if something's not working exactly how you want it to be. So $1,400, again, that gets towards that $1,000 price point to move one rig to immersion mining. We see the C2, and this is supposed to be able to house 2 miners, right? So let's talk about this one. This is good medium scale. I think this is like a more realistic deployment of a mining farm for an average person, right? 120 kilowatts. And let's put that into perspective. That's going to be 24 current generation ant miners, S19, etc., S21 soon, right? So we've got single loop here. We've got a big dry cooler. You know, at a glance, looking at that, you know, somewhere between like a smart car, Miata, right? A small car. And then you got this big boy. So the dry cooler is doubling in capacity here. And then you're just slapping another immersion row right on top. But this is, you know, as far as immersion goes, like this seems like a simple, digestible setup. Let's run through this one because I think this one's pretty interesting. We see a dry cooler, 2 fan, pretty big size. We see a pretty big enclosure here. Okay, so what can this thing do? The good news, it operates on 3-phase as well as single phase, because there are many immersion mining setups that do not support single phase. So you may think you got your plan and your solution, but if it does not work on, say, single phase, well, then your problem is no longer solved. And they do have customized solutions for What's miners. Again, What's miners are very popular in major Bitcoin mining farms, but on a smaller scale, many people often find themselves dealing with ant miners. I do think out of the 3 solutions we've looked at so far that they have the most digestible solutions and website. I do appreciate that. The concept of immersion mining, if you are handy, is something you could definitely solve yourself. At the end of the day, you have a metal tank, and what this is a custom, someone made this and they're trying to sell it on eBay. But you have a tank, you have fluid, then you need a pipe, a pump, a radiator cooler. I mean, this just looks like an unbranded dry cooler, big ass radiator. You run your fluid through this. You have the hot side, the cold side, and then it comes back in and you're immersion mining. So if you want to embark on a big, exciting project, well, here is definitely an option for you. Ladies and gentlemen, on to the next topic. It's going to be Easy Blockchain. They deploy major mining farms. I've talked to them over email before about touring one of their facilities. They've been building a big one in South Carolina, USA. And they don't have any small scale solutions, but they're very proud of boasting about immersion, right? This is going to immediately be interesting and applicable to you, or absolutely not. They have Smartbox mobile mining containers, right? Road legal, baby. We bring this thing anywhere. It's a mining container, and it's for immersion, and it's basically a plug-and-play solution. There's GRC as another option. I'm not super familiar with this one. GRC, they have this solution. At a glance, my concern with this is going to be basically an open top. I hope they have covers and things like that. Obviously, this is just a render. I struggled to find much information on this, but this reminds me of the immersion mining farm that we toured in 2019, actually also in South Carolina. And I thought it was so freaking cool and very advanced setup, especially for the time. custom solutions, stuff like that. But the takeaway, though, in retrospect, is that there were no lids on top. And so at that point, it's very easy for your oil to get dirty. And you know, dust and other particles get in there. They stay in the oil. They can potentially clog it up. As we see more and more immersion mining solutions, we will see more and more random Chinese company rips of immersion mining solutions. So we can see something that seems more akin to the DCX Bixbit fog hashing style solution here under the Leon Lee brand. And in classic capacity for this, we can see that this one seems to come in at a bit of a lower price point. But what kind of support would you get? Who's used this and it's worked well? It's hard to say. At a glance, it's intriguing, right? But I just always worry about the documentation and language barrier with things like this. If you are super advanced and know what you're doing, solutions like this can, save you a lot of money. But on the other hand, if you're not those things, this could turn into an absolute nightmare. But as a tenured Bitcoin miner, I would consider myself at this point. I'm not bragging or whatever else. It's just a fact. I got gray hair on my head. But if we really click that pause button, you could say, oh, well, I should have sold the coin then, and then also sold the miner at this time, and then maybe bought some at the bottom of the bear market for $100 a miner, and then flipped them several years later after mining them, and for $2,000 a unit, whatever. You can't see the future and you can't change the past. But historically, the biggest lesson I learned by far is get in the game as soon as possible and get a long-term plan. You want to get rich tomorrow? Find something else. But seriously, like in retrospect, I would have just gotten as many miners as I could and got them all set up, and I would be killing it. But I didn't have the cash flow at the time. You got to be able to do whatever you can do. Obviously, not everyone's going to turn around and just go ahead and make a farm. And as it stands, more people are bullish on Bitcoin mining than ever before. The landscape is changing. It's like that saying that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. All right, so figure out, if you want to get into this, what you can do. For me, I'm very happy that I have been mining nonstop since I got into cryptocurrency. I see a lot of things I could have done better. I could have done different. I had a lot of fortitude. I mined through the bull market, bear market, held a lot of coins the whole way up and down and everything in between. Any way you cut it, mining cryptocurrencies has been one of the most profitable ventures of my life ever. I could not recommend it anymore. And above all, it's so much fun. I'm in this not just to earn passive income with cryptocurrencies, but I love the tech. Become an integral piece of your crypto network and start mining it. That's pretty cool. Have something physical, okay, here in the digital world, in the digital era, and the digital sector of cryptocurrencies. You get it. All right, fine. I love mining. It's really cool. Other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was easy to follow. I hope it clears up some questions because there's a lot of newcomers to the crypto mining space, which I think is super cool. But with that, a lot of new questions like, how do I do this? How do I set this up? I want to get started. Well, hopefully this functions as a full, start to finish tutorial guide for you. If I missed anything, please let me know in the comments. I'll try to improve in the future. If you have any questions that I did not cover in this video, related or not, as long as it's, crypto centric, or we can talk about tails too, let me know down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer all of them. Again, please join the VoskCoin Discord server. We also have our own forum, which is really cool, VoskCoinTalk.com. As always, I appreciate you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you on the next one. And if you don't subscribe, we're not friends.